Well, I mean, in the work, some work that I've been doing with launching some own, educational products where we think about, recently I've been using some of the product owner tools to develop my own additional educational products. And we thought about this exact algorithm, like how can we give people more value, right? How can we, what additional things can we give to people as participating in the online education program that we developed? So can we give them additional certifications? Can we give them additional, evaluations and certifications that are industry accepted? And then how do we think about how do we grow rather than trying to reduce the cost, right? How do we get more people in the educational online on-demand program? And I find this really a good technique to start thinking about, how do we focus on what's truly valuable? How do we prioritize our choices as in this launching this product? So it's the product that we used.
Yeah, I love that. And there's two questions that I want to answer in real time from the participants.
Yeah.
One is from Kimberly, which says, what difference can you see in prioritizing for nonprofits? And Kimberly, I actually am a co-founder of a nonprofit, Every Voice Engaged Foundation. So I have this question for myself when I'm working with Every Voice Engaged. And Kimberly, I have found no difference in the rules of prioritization because a nonprofit provides value and can, charge for their services. It's what we do with the money that the nonprofit acquires and how it acquires it that it's a little different. So I have not found any differences in when I'm prioritizing for my nonprofit and when I'm prioritizing for Contenio. I still see that I need attributes and weights that matter. Jason also asks, if we value revenue before cost, how do we make sure the case that investing in technical infrastructure is a priority business value when it is often tied to reducing costs? So for everyone, Jason, and especially Jason, because you asked about it, what I think we need is now a set of acceptance tests across the prioritization of the backlog. And here's what I have found to be successful, is that a well-prioritized backlog has at least one item for every stakeholder, which means if I anthropomorphize my system and have my system as its own stakeholder, then I'm going to, through this rule, which trumps the prior algorithm, make sure that I'm still investing in technical infrastructure. So I think that there are some rules that we can apply that enable us to make sure that we're maintaining balance and maintaining insight. Now, do these rules apply perfectly for every single release and every single time? Of course not, right? These are I'd say maybe strong guidelines as opposed to natural laws. However, the important thing here is that I think it's important for product owners and product managers to be aware that these guidelines will help you in creating a more balanced, a more effective, and a higher impact backlog. One final thing, and then Carlton, I want to talk about something about when the dev team and the business team don't agree, which is Kimberly Piper keeps feeding us great questions. Among them, how about the government? And Kimberly, I'm going to dodge that question because when you start talking about the government, you really start talking about a different prioritization process writ large, which is, there are laws, for example, that governments have to adhere to about how they prioritize their work. So a product owner, in many cases, when they're working in a government situation, they can't actually prioritize based on these attributes because there's an overriding law that requires them to deal with something special. Then the last thing is John says, shouldn't every item align to strategy? John, sure, but not every item aligns equally. and some items are explicitly designed for strategic purposes, and those I think should be called out. So let's look at something that, how do we manage implementation details? And Carlton, when we were putting this together, you pointed out that the business priorities might be organized that way, but when the dev team looks at it, the dev team might say, look, it's better for the company if we actually implement backlog item number 3 first, because it either reduces risk, or we could recreate what the business priority was to get a faster release in the market, where, specifically, the business said release when all of this value is created, but the dev team says, hey, wait a minute, if we did this, we can actually release. How do you deal with this situation in the work that you're doing with your clients?
Well, I mean, when I work with new product owners and the first time they see this type of ordering by the dev team on the right-hand side, they get a little agitated. And I'll say some people get a little upset if they've had a bad relationship with the dev teams in the past, because they might walk in thinking, well, in Scrum, the business team or the business or the product owner gets to set priorities, and the team needs to work in the priority order set by the product owner. But what we need to think about, and as I emphasized earlier, which is this idea of this dialogue, right, and that the product owner should try to leverage the knowledge and the experience of the team in the prioritization or in the ordering of the items in the product backlog. And the idea is that while the product owner may come in with some initial first ideas, it's through the dialogue with the team and through agreement that they may choose to reorder the backlog, and maybe it's a way that the dev team, is the way that the dev team suggests, right? I mean, we want to leverage their experience with the technical people. They oftentimes know a lot about what the product can do, what the technology can do, sometimes more so than the product owners and the product managers do. And that's great, right? If we have great ideas, we should try to leverage them in the ordering of the items in the backlog.
Now, when you're done with this process, so let's say that, in step one, the business sets up their priorities, they hand it to the dev team, and the dev team says that this is the ordering. I know how I respond. I want to hear how you've found it. What I do is I then have a conversation with my dev team, and I ratify that as the new priority, meaning I will adjust my priority to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and I throw these out so that I have a single backlog that, through a collaboration with my dev teams, has been prioritized in a way that we all agree on. Now, some people actually say, no, the business priority should always be retained as the business priority, independent of the dev team. Where do you fall in on that conversation? Because I like to be in alignment, but some people say that that's not reflecting the business priority. What do you recommend here?
For me, what works for me is what you described on the right, where you have that dialogue, have that conversation with the team, you readjust your priorities based upon the input of the team so that there's a single list. This other approach here on the left-hand side where we retain the business priorities, that's okay, but then I prefer, for me, like I said, what works for me is more on the right. Okay, let's be realistic.
So you're with me on
what
this
the
one.
Team says.
You would agree that, this is where we're in alignment.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's just better overall for the organization too. It's more realistic.
Now, Mary Sutton asks, what if the reason for the reorder is not legit? So, for example, if we are obligated to have 4 releases a year, that second one has no appeal because we can't release early. Mary, I would agree, right? I mean, if I were the product owner of an organization that was obligated to have 4 releases a year, and this second release, for whatever reason, was not legit, I would explain to my dev team, first I would thank them. I'd say, guys, thank you for structuring a release that would make sense, but it really just doesn't make sense from us from a business perspective, or there's a higher level reason why we don't want or need that release. And so I would have that conversation. At Contenio, and one of the things that I like to do, and you'll see that if you watch our road mapping, is that a backlog doesn't determine the cadence of the releases. It simply determines the priority and what the cut line is. The cadence of the releases are determined by the roadmap. And if you draw a graph that says this is the value to the market and this is the time of over the year, you'll find that products often have different curves of when it's optimal to release them. And so my favorite example when I'm teaching road mapping is if you looked at how Electronic Arts releases their sports franchises, FIFA soccer, John Madden football, the NBA basketball sports franchise, if you just analyze when those products are released, you'll find that they're timed to the seasons of the sport. And it doesn't make sense to release, John Madden football in, April, because all of the sports fans are worried about baseball, not football. And you can apply that in any sport around the world for cricket or for, rugby, or is that these sports have their natural rhythms. And so I think that this is really important to understand. Now, Carlton, we've talked a lot about different attributes and different things like that. Let's give a couple of pieces of practical advice. And one of them was not more than 7 attributes. What happened? Like, why not create 30 attributes for your prioritization? If 3 are good, wouldn't 30 be good?
I think it just becomes way too many ideas to keep in your head. I mean, you really then just subdivide your different stakeholders into such narrow slices. It becomes too much, right? In my experience, when there's too many attributes, it also makes having those conversations can make it really take a long time, because you have to cover 30 attributes as opposed to maybe 7.
Yeah, and I find that what it also happens is too many attributes actually create the opportunity